For a long time, I felt like my fibromyalgia flares, they just came out of nowhere. One minute I would be okay, and the next minute I would be lost in the sea of either fog, pain, or just being so tired I can't even think straight. What I didn't realize in the beginning was that there was always signs I was about to go into the flare. And what that has to deal with is you have to look at being conscious of what your body is telling you, sometimes even screaming at you. I just didn't know how to listen. And it took me a long time to figure out how it did for me. Everybody is different because everybody's symptoms are different. So I can only give you some of the symptoms or some of the signals that my body gives me. One of the things I always get frustrated by is when I start feeling these symptoms and I know I've got stuff I've got to get done, and I have to question myself of whether it's worth the cost. There were times during my early days when I felt like I was in a flare that lasted for months. Heck, even now, there are times when it feels like that. Sometimes my flares will last a week. I think most recently, the one that lasted for months was back when I first moved to the UK. And it literally lasted for 2 or 3 months. And you know what triggered it? It was because they messed up with my medications for my sleeping. And if I don't get a minimum of 6 hours of sleep a night, I'm going to have a flare. And those are some of the most intense. It didn't help that I was also coming from being very isolatory, which is something we all recognize. And I was starting to come out because I started going to university. It was a big change. I not only changed countries, I went from being somebody who they called the ghost of the subdivision to actually being out amongst people. And I was also going to university. All three of those are major stressors in our lives, whether it be something like possibly you get a divorce, you get married, you lose your job, or you get a new job. The big thing that really affects your fibromyalgia is stress. And if you pay attention, if you think about it, how many times have you had a flare because you found that you've gotten really stressed about something? Maybe you're taking care of kids and one of them gets into trouble. Maybe you're caring for your elderly parents who are sick. Again, a major stressor. And in hindsight, if you pay attention to those, you will find that your symptoms get worse. And you will also start feeling things in your body. For me, when I deal with pain, it stays at what I consider a tolerable level, which is about a 3 or 4. Once it starts getting over that, that's when my body starts saying, okay, slow down. But do you know how often I've actually ignored that? Long enough that sometimes my flares get really bad and I have to get help in dealing with it. People start looking at me instead of looking and seeing me white. I'm more gray because the pain is showing through my body. And often there are times when I don't notice it because I'm so used to it that I tend to ignore it. As time went by, I did learn to pay more attention to what my body was telling me. If I start feeling really slow, if I start walking with more of a limp than I normally do, when my knees start buckling easier, I know I'm on my way to a flare. And what I need to do is slow down. As time went by, I started learning the signals, and it wasn't actually really proving that my body was unpredictable. If I paid attention to the signals my body was giving me, whether it be making it more difficult for me to lift my arms, whether it mean because sometimes my pinky finger, I have a hard time actually pressing down on the A key on my keyboard, and I'm a 10-finger typer, so my fingers move faster than my brain sometimes. And when I notice things like that, or when I notice I have no choice but to go take a nap, I know that I have got to stop. When I was selling my house, I had a lot of work to do. And I basically stayed in a flare for the entire year, but I did everything I could to keep it to be a low-level flare. And that meant when I started feeling myself slow down, I stopped because I didn't want to push myself into a full-blown. It meant my pain was higher. I won't lie, it did. But it was my way of managing the pain to try and get done what needed to be done. I did pay someone to help me because I had to. If I had done it on my own, it never would have gotten done. What symptom affects you the most and how do you work with it? If you're comfortable sharing, leave it in the comments. It might help someone else recognize what their own body is trying to tell them. And sometimes it's not even all about the physical movement of how you deal with things. Maybe you have a harder time connecting your thoughts to what you're trying to say. One of the ways I feel the cognitive fog is I feel like my brain is batted in cotton wool, which basically makes it so that it's harder to see through. At least that's the way it perceives in me. For me, my eyes start darkening. I have a harder time seeing because it's like I've put on a pair of sunglasses. I know that means my brain is getting to the point where it's needing to either stop, slow down, or it's going to go into a full-blown fog where I can't barely do anything. And that's one of my signals is when my vision starts changing, I know the chances of me going into fibro fog is extremely high. All of these things is stuff you've got to pay attention to. The way I learned was by paying attention. Sometimes I notice that my smell, some stuff that usually is stuff I love, but all of a sudden the smell starts turning my stomach. It really can affect how you do things. And sometimes people think that you don't want to pay attention to your body because you're so overloaded with everything it gives you. But at the same time, that also builds awareness, and it is your defense system. Ignoring what your body is telling you is a major issue. And by saying, okay, let's see what you're trying to tell me, is actually your way to fight back against the illness. It's also about being able to go to your doctor with specific symptoms, specific grievances, and it actually helps them help you. It also makes doing research easier. Because if you've got an idea of what is specifically going wrong with you, again, that's the way you fight back. It's the way you take back control. It is probably one of the most important lessons that Fibro teaches you. The two most important is stress reduction, body awareness, and not necessarily in that order. What fibromyalgia taught me is despite it being unpredictable, it is not impossible to manage your body, but it takes you to putting in the work. If this is something you're going through as well, I share more about living with fibro and learning how to manage it in a more supportive way. So if that helps, you're always welcome to stick around. I know how isolating fibromyalgia can feel. So I have also started a Discord channel for people who are dealing with this and would like to talk, share experiences, and just feel a little less alone. So I will leave that below if you're interested. And if you want a more personal connection, I am also leaving my email address in the description below. I do want to add one thing. These videos are written from my own personal experiences, from my own research. They are not meant as a medical diagnosis. They're not meant as medical advice. I'm just trying to share ways that I've learned to deal with the illness from over 3 decades of experience.